Hello everybody, my name is Dratnos and welcome to my guide to Atal'Dazar plus 21. This footage comes from patch 8.0, but pretty much nothing has changed about this dungeon or the specs that we ran for it, so I feel like it is still very applicable to current day Mythic Plus. We are starting off this week because the affixes are Tyrannical, Tyrannical being the important one for this strategy, but also Bursting and Skittish and Infested, of course. But since it's Tyrannical, we want to start off by immediately pulling a boss and bloodlusting the boss. If it's Fortified week, we usually instead start with a big trash pull and bloodlust that. I may end up making a video of Atal'Dazar on Fortified week as well. But here we're jumping straight down to Razan. First thing we do, we're going to kill it. The Razan has a couple mechanics. One of them is that terrifying visage there. That's going to fear everybody who is within line of sight of the boss. I can use Cloak of Shadows to negate it, and our Demon Hunter can get dispelled every time it comes out. And that's what we end up doing on this fight. There are also these bone piles all over the room. If you run into one, you're going to get slowed and spawn a raptor, or if Razan himself runs over one, it will also spawn the raptor. The raptors don't do all that much, they just do quite a bit of tank damage, but it's fine to have one or two up. You can even have more up if you wanted to abuse something like a Subtlety Rogue here, but they actually do quite a bit of tank damage, so you need to make sure that you have a good way to control them, like something like Rings of Pieces or Frost Mages to facilitate keeping those off the tank. That's a useful thing to do. So yeah, the boss just does this fear. We line of sight around this pillar, and then the boss also does an ability called Pursuit, where it'll target somebody and just start running at them. And we use the pursuit. What we do is we have that person run to this other pillar over on the other side of the arena, and then we start just line of sighting over there, and we wait until the next pursuit, and then we just keep bouncing back and forth between those two pillars and using them to line of sight the boss ability. This fight also does a reasonable amount of tank damage, and there's also an annoying ability where if you stand like just behind the boss, like slightly within its hitbox, but behind it, it will do a tail slash on you, which is very obnoxious when it happens. Usually it doesn't happen to us all that often anymore, but it's just one of the weirdest abilities ever, because there's such a small, it's like a 10-yard circle or something where you can stand in it and have that happen. You'll see I accidentally got feared here because I didn't make good enough line of sight, but luckily a fast Master Spell from our healer ended up saving both me and Zach, who intentionally gets feared every time and just relies on getting dispelled so that he doesn't have to lose any damage running out and hiding. And then I get pursued here, so I just run over this side. Once pursuit has 2 seconds left on the debuff, you can actually get back under the boss and you won't get eaten up. If you do get caught by the boss with more than 2 seconds on your pursuit debuff, you'll get basically killed on High Tyrannical. You can actually still use abilities and you can still get healed during the time that you're being eaten, but you're gonna die if it's High Tyrannical. You take so much damage. Once again, I'm now on my second set of cooldowns, 2 minutes into this fight. This fight takes so long on High Tyrannical, it has so much health. But because Cloak of Shadows is also 2-minute cooldown, I got to line up my cloak with my second set of cooldowns and just stay in and keep doing damage during that phase. And that's what's allowing me to do reasonably good single target here on this fight. You see everybody's actually doing a ton of damage on this fight. We're all doing more than 17k single target here, which is very good. That's important to be able to do on Tyrannical weeks. Atal'Dazar is actually a pretty great Tyrannical dungeon because the second and third bosses kill themselves, so you don't actually have to worry all that much. You see Waffle there, he actually got tail slash back, but for standing right in that sweet spot of where you're not supposed to stand, right behind the boss where his tail will trigger. He won't actually cast the ability unless somebody's standing there, and then if somebody is standing there, he will cast the ability. Now Pursuit going out on Waffle, he's just going to run it on over back to where we started, and this is going to work out nicely because the boss is going to be over towards where we want to be when it dies anyways. And that's good, because now we're going to exit up those same stairs that we entered using, and we're going to start pulling some Toxid Saurid packs. So Toxid Saurids, these are very brutal mobs, particularly on Fortified weeks. So not too bad on this week, which is a Tyrannical week. But they end up doing they do a leap, and the leap also has a 3-yard cleave component, so you really want to make sure that you are not within 3 yards of anybody else when you're getting leapt on. We're actually feeling comfortable enough to pull all of these here at the same time. It's important, though, we're using big defensives to help make sure that we don't die to this, and we're trying to not stagger our bursting stacks as well. That's why we didn't pull all 10 at the same time, because then they would all die at the same time, and we'd take 10 stacks of bursting, but instead we did 2 sets of 5 stacks of bursting, which is a lot better. Now we're running up this left side here. The Honor Guard is infested, and it's important that we sap it and we don't put other debuffs on it. You'll see that actually because it's paralyzed here, the way it works is that Confessors will try and dispel any CC'd mobs if there's a magic effect on them. Now, it will also remove abilities like Sap, but if there's just Sap on it or just Blind on it, they won't try to remove it because they don't see anything that... They only try and dispel CCs on things if it's a magic effect. and then they successfully remove all of the stuff we've done to them if the Dispel cast goes off. So it was actually pretty bad that we paralyzed that particular Honor Guard there. Now we're using a cool strategy. I actually came up with this one. The Juggernauts will target somebody at ranged, if there's anybody at ranged, and try and charge to them. But you'll notice at the top left of our screen up there, okay, not the top left anymore, now toward the bottom left where my face is. Now at the top left again, now over there. Yeah, you'll see I actually showed my stream there by highlighting it with my mouse. We have our ranged actually standing over there, and the Juggernauts can't successfully charge up there. They'll target one of the people up on top of that pillar, but then they can't actually climb up the pillar because there's that jump involved. And so the Juggernauts are unable to actually execute the charge on the people that far away. And that removes a ton of damage from this pull. That's my strategy. I came up with that one, pretty proud of it. And I'm glad it's working out so well for us. The only thing you have to do is you make sure you're close enough for those people to be in range while they're on top of the pillar, so that they can do their damage and their healing up there. And now we're just going to kill off these two Infested. The Sky Screamer that comes from downstairs, the way it works is if you use a ranged ability to pull that particular Sky Screamer, it will jump up to you. So it won't even path around the long way or anything, it will just fly up to you. And that's really good because now we get to kill two Infested at once, which is a lot more efficient than killing one Infested at once, obviously. And we're gonna kill these two off. We could get a third Infested here. There's an Infested patrolling Confessor farther over to the side there, but we end up not actually needing it for percent, so we don't kill it as part of our route here. This route, because our tank for this week or for this dungeon is a Brewmaster, not a Death Knight, we end up our route is a little different if we have access to a Death Knight. That's because a Death Knight can mind control the undead mobs, particularly the Risen Honor Guards on the other side of the map, and we want to make good use of that because those mobs A, are a pain to kill, and B, do a lot of damage. But because we don't have access to a Death Knight, we actually have to kill them or ignore them, so our route includes pulling these two here. Recent technology updates, when we've been running with a Death Knight, we've decided to not pull this little 2-pack here because it's inefficient and slow to pull just two mobs at once. Augurs cast Wildfire, which should be interrupted as much as possible. They also cast Fiery Enchant, which Fiery Enchant starts a channel, and a second after that channel starts, it starts pulsing damage on everybody and putting swirlies that you have to dodge. But you can actually kick it within that first second and nothing will happen, so that's really good. Now I'm stealthing ahead, finding a sap on this Stalker. We don't use our Demon Hunter's ability to see the Stalker in stealth. Instead, we use me because we're going to want to use the Demon Hunter's ability to see the Demon Hunter's Spectral Sight to get some Stalkers from up over to the right on a set of stairs. We want to save that ability for those. We're just going to kill off this Honor Guard first here. You'll notice our Demon Hunter is now going on a mission. He's going to go Spectral Sight and then Throwglaive, those two stealth mobs there. And then we're getting the Shield Bearer as well. And we're just going to kill off all of these mobs at the same time. And we've got two CZ'd Infested that we're going to kill off after we're done with these. The Honor Guard, of course, the big priority damage target here. Honor Guards, once the totem that reanimates them dies, they start just doing huge amounts of damage to everybody. So it's really a race to make sure those die before anything else happens. And now we're just killing off these Shield Bearers and the Stalkers. Stalkers don't do too much of note. The main thing is that they start in stealth, and they do a couple other abilities, but nothing too big for us to worry about. The Shield Bearers, by contrast, have two important abilities. One is called Bulwark of Juju, and that's where they put that blue circle around them. You got to make sure you stun them out of that or pull the other mobs outside of it, otherwise things are taking very dramatically reduced damage while they're inside of it. Shield Bearers also do Shield Bash. Shield Bash will target the closest person to them, or if the tank is in range, it will target the tank. But if the tank is out of range, it will just target the closest person to them. And it does a pretty huge physical nuke to that person. So if your tank is kiting, you need to make sure that you are not next to the Shield Bearers unless you have a plan for soaking the Shield Bash. It can be dodged, so a Demon Hunter can run next to bait them and then Blade Dance, and then they'll go on cooldown and everybody else can be next to them until they're up again. Or I can run next to them and use my evasion to soak the Shield Bashes as well. And that's something that I do on weeks where we have to kite Shield Bearers. That's a good way to stop them from being too lethal of a threat, because those Shield Bashes, particularly if two go out at once, or if Raging is active, or if Fortified is active, they can really just kill people out of nowhere, and it can be a very big surprise. Luckily, also fighting mobs where we are fighting right here, there's not too big of a threat. If somebody dies, they can just run back because the spawn point is right at the start of the dungeon, very close to where we are right now. Now we're just killing off these sets of Gahunis, and we're going to Shroud to the boss now. We want to skip all of this obnoxious trash here. This trash, the reanimated Honor Guards, really are the main thing that we try and pull as few of as possible. So we pull all that extra stuff from the other side to mean that we don't have to pull anything here. I distracted the True Sight mobs over to the right so that they wouldn't see us as we run by. Now we just skip past this. Shroud's ending now. We've got a load of extra time on this Shroud, and we're on to Volkoff. So the main thing with Volkoff is obviously you want to make sure that these three totems die within a couple seconds of each other. I usually go on this one. Our tank and our Demon Hunter start work on that one there, and at some point our Demon Hunter is going to end up going over to the one that our Balance Druid is working on, because of course that one's usually going to be the highest health one. I blew my cooldowns on this target here, and I'm actually a little bit worried about refreshing my dots here. I did end up vanishing and putting 2 Empowered Garrotes on this one, but I am a little worried, and I'm worried, even though it's at 30% health right now, it's got a very huge Garrote on it that is ticking with those 2 Shrouded Suffocation traits, so I really need to make sure that I don't actually over-damage this thing, and I am being careful. I'm watching the other totems. I'm running over to that one, and it turns out that I actually don't need to help kill it. It's already low enough. You really don't want to be in this position where everybody switches damage onto the high health one, and then the 2 medium health ones end up not getting killed because everybody swapped to the high health one. So my main job is to make sure that I'm ready to kill this one as soon as any of the others die. We do a pretty good job this time of killing them all off pretty much instantly. You have quite a big grace period, actually, before you have to kill everything after the first one dies, but it's still important to, like, we were very good there, and it's better to be on that side than sorry. Volkoff has an interesting mechanic where once those 3 totems are dead, he obviously starts taking damage, but he also starts dealing damage to himself, and the damage he deals to himself scales with Tyrannical, and it scales with Mythic Plus level, so you'll see his health is just evaporating here. That's not actually us, that's largely his own ability to kill himself, which is part of the reason why this is such a great dungeon to do on Tyrannical weeks, because Volkoff is basically never too long of a boss fight, because he's just doing this massive damage to himself the whole time as well. So that is... that's wonderful. That's great. It's great that this isn't too long of a boss fight. Even if it does go long, the pools start despawning, the old pools, so you can just keep kiting them around in a triangle. It's not like you run out of room, which is that's kind of the way that these boss fights would have behaved back in Legion, is that it would be you would run out of room eventually because the pools would not despawn, and on High Tyrannical that would be like a soft enrage. But they've kind of moved away from that in Battle for Azeroth, and you don't even have to worry too much about that. Now the boss is about to die. We want to make sure that we're not too close to this gate because we don't want to pull the mobs on the other side of it. So you'll see we're pulling kind of back towards the middle of the room, away from the gate. Now we're going to skip our way out. Since we have access to a Brewmaster Monk, we have a really cool way to skip out here. I'm going to sap this Witch Doctor, and now it doesn't matter, we can get next to it without aggroing. I'm going to distract the Honor Guard, and we're going to ring the Honor Guard over to the side. Because it's distracted, it's not going to start patrolling back, and we can just walk on by. It's not close enough to aggro. Everybody can just walk along by the side here. Neither the Honor Guard nor the Witch Doctor is going to get in combat because the Honor Guard is too far away and the Witch Doctor is sapped, and that's how we skip that pack on the way back out here. If you don't have access to a Monk, a Rogue can actually pretty easily do it solo. The way that would work is you would blind the Honor Guard, you would sap the Witch Doctor, and you would get in combat with both of them, and then you'd run by, the whole group would run by, and because they were already in combat with you, they would not get in combat with the rest of your group, and then you would vanish. And that's the way we do this when we don't have access to a Brewmaster. But the problem with doing that is that it costs me my Vanish, and that means I'm going to have less damage for this pull that's coming up here. So what we do here is we CC the non-infested Shadowblade Stalker, we hit it with the Imprison, and then I sap it as well, so it comes out of stealth, so we know where it is, and then... because when you imprison stuff, it doesn't actually drop stealth on them, but when you sap them, it does. Interesting mechanic there. We kill off these Kahunis, and then we're going to break the CC on the Stalker, and we're going to pull it into this Witch Doctor pack here. And this is a good spot for my Vanish. Vanish will be used to silence the Witch Doctors for 6 seconds each, which ends up being a lot of breathing room on them, and we would have lost that if we'd been forced to use Vanish to skip out. And then we're just making sure that we kick these as much as possible. We're using Solar Beam from our Balance Druid to keep them silenced for even longer. And that's important because Venom Blast, which is what they cast, does a ton of damage, and Unstable Hex, which they cast and has a very quick cast time, also is extremely obnoxious. It's actually pretty difficult to kick the Unstable Hex. You need to be really looking for it if your goal is to kick that, but you'll notice using my interrupts tracker in the middle top left of my screen, that everybody's interrupts are basically on cooldown the whole time here. We're just looking for good opportunities to kick shield or to kick Witch Doctors. Once those Witch Doctors are dead, the threat on this pull is mostly over. It's usually those rogue Venom Blasts that will end up killing off people when things start to get out of control here. And now that it's just Shield Bearers and the Stalker, this fight's pretty easy. Somebody's got to go over and open the gate to the next area so that we can move on there. That's the little lever over on the left. That's what you got to do. You'll see I'm doing that now. And now we're just going to keep on pulling. You can, when a Sky Screamer is infested like this, you can pull the swords with the Sky Screamer, and the swords will still take damage because infested is a % health heal. But since swords have such low base health, they will end up being dealt damage faster than the heal. But it's still faster and, in our opinion, a little safer. It might not be faster, but it is safer to just kill them off separately first, so that you don't have to deal with them for 3 times as long, because they do so much damage to everybody. I'm sorry, I've got a little... I had like a yawn that I was suppressing for like a minute there, and it really ended up rebelling against me at the very end there. Anyways, we're killing off this Sky Screamer now, the infested one. It's possible that you can save the Infested Stalker from the stairs and do it with this Sky Screamer if you wanted to CC that instead of the non-infested Stalker, but we think that that is a little sketch. It's possible, though. You could absolutely do that. Now we're just killing off these Kahunis, and then we'll move on into the next Sky Screamer pull. This part is pretty scripted. One thing that I like to do on Fortified weeks is I like to actually just do the route pretty similar to what we've done now, except instead of starting with Razan, we start by going up the left side and lusting a big trash pull there. And then we don't actually do Razan until we're done with these 2 trash packs, and then we jump down and kill Razan. And that ends up being a pretty nice path on Fortified weeks because it gives you your lust on pull, and it lets you lust the staircase pack we just did. So that is absolutely a strategy you can use on those weeks, but on Tyrannical weeks we like to lust bosses, so that's what we do. Now I'm distracting this middle pack. The middle pack is not actually that bad. You can pull it. It's worth a lot of percent, but we didn't want to this week. We have been pulling it when we switch. Our different tanks like different plans. Sometimes we run with Jason, our current brewmaster. Sometimes we run with Snap, who is a Death Knight, and Snap really likes to pull that middle pack, and I actually quite like it too. It means you have to pull less trash from the rest of the dungeon because it's worth a lot more percent than the Sky Screamer pack, but it is a little bit more obnoxious, and it does have a little bit more potential to wipe the group, so you need to be more on top of your game if you want to do that. So instead what we're doing this week is we pulled a little bit of extra trash from both the living side and the dead side at the start of the dungeon, and now we're just going to kill off all of the sword packs along the way, and that's going to work out just fine for us and the Sky Screamers. You don't need all that much time for the last 2 bosses this dungeon. You do need quite a bit of time for the last boss, but the second to last boss does not take very much time either, because like the second boss, she has a mechanic where she kills herself, which is the transfusion mechanic. So because of that, the fight doesn't actually end up taking all that much longer on a 21 versus how long it takes on a 16. For our group, it would take maybe 20 seconds less to do this on a 16 versus how long it takes us to do it on 21, because it usually dies during the same phase anyways, and she does so much of her damage at the end of the phases when she nukes herself. So that's part of the reason why this is such a favorable Tyrannical dungeon, as I was saying, is because the bosses do so much damage themselves. So unlike other Tyrannical dungeons where you end up needing to commit 15 of your minutes to killing bosses, in this dungeon you only need to commit 10 of your minutes to killing bosses, and that is a lot better. That gives you so much more wiggle room to kill off trash. And that's, of course, what you see us doing now. We pull 2 Sky Screamers. Very important to kick the Sky Screamers, of course. If any of their casts get off, it's very often a wipe. Now we're CCing the Infested Sky Screamer, the Infested Augur, and we're going to pull the swords through to the non-infested humanoids here. Our tank's just going to get a little bit of threat on the swords, and then add in these humanoids. I'm going to silence in the Augur so that it doesn't cast and so that it gets next to the tank. The Augurs in this pull actually behave a little bit weird, where if nobody's in melee, like if their threat target isn't in melee range, they'll start casting. But if their threat target is in melee range, sometimes they just won't cast forever. Particularly, like they'll do their first cast sometimes, and then they'll just stop casting, which is weird. That's not how the Augurs in the rest of the dungeon behave, but that is how the ones here behave, so not quite sure why that is, but it does mean that if you try and, for instance, kite these up the fire stairs while you're doing them, you have to make sure that you kick them, and they cast pretty much non-stop, whereas if you just fight them without moving, they don't cast at all, or they cast only once or twice, and it's a lot easier to deal with them. So for that reason, I would not recommend. One thing that we've tried to do is we've tried to kite this pull or the infested pull up the stairs, and that has caused us problems because the mob has just been left behind and been casting, and then if we go and try and kick them, it's in the fire, and that's really bad. So that's something to be careful of. The fire on these stairs actually has the same pattern every time. It just goes bottom, middle, top, bottom, middle, top. So it takes a long time to go up if the fire's in front of you, but if you're going down, it can be quite fast. You can go through quite fast without touching the fire. The fire scales with Mythic Plus level, so it's pretty much a 1-shot on high Mythic Plus, or a 2-shot at the very least. So it's very important to not get hit by that. Luckily, you can just res somebody if they do take it. Particularly on the way back down, you don't even have to res them. They can just release and meet you up at the last boss room. But if somebody dies to it on the way up, it will cost you 15 seconds. And it's a really obnoxious way to lose 15 seconds because it's such an easy part of the dungeon. It shouldn't be what kills anybody. But it does kill us from time to time because we make mistakes on it. I'm not really sure why we do, but sometimes we do. There's a little trick I've developed to help our group know where the fire is. If you line yourself up with those little tiki torches on the side there, you're not going to be in the fire area, but if you are above or below those torches, you're in danger of getting hit. So that's a little trick I've taught our group so that we don't actually end up getting killed by it quite as much as we used to, which is great because it has depleted us, I think, once or twice, and that's been really, really brutal. Now we're doing this pull here. This pull features an Augur, which does the cast that we want to kick. Features a Juggernaut. We don't have an area to cleverly use game mechanics and cause the Juggernaut's charges to not go out, so we just have Waffle Sauce outside of the group baiting the charges. And then we also have the priestesses here. And the priestesses, the way they work is they, like the boss, will cast transfusion. And then you need to run into a blood pool to cause the priestesses to kill themselves instead of heal themselves off you. If for some reason you don't have a blood pool around, say somebody accidentally soaked one during the trash pool earlier, one spawned under somebody and they didn't notice and they soaked it, it's no big deal. Just stun the priestess so that they don't heal and so that their transfusion cast doesn't keep going off. But ideally, you should just be able to use the blood pools to kill off the priestesses, which is pretty great. And you'll notice that now we're going to do 2 infested priestesses. It's a really easy pull, actually, these 2 infested priestesses. Jason's going to get them in combat right now so that they'll just cast the transfusion. And because they are casters, right, when they're casting transfusion, we don't even have to worry about them getting next to that Juggernaut. Great Imprison from our Demon Hunter there to stop that Juggernaut from charging next to a priestess and start healing with infested. Very, very good play that we just saw right there. I didn't even notice that when we were doing this dungeon the first time, but it was very, very good. Ended up saving us quite a bit of time on that. And yeah, you'll see the priestess's health there is just getting nuked every tick of transfusion. I think it scales with M+ level, or at least it's percent health based, so it doesn't matter what the M+ level is because they die so fast when they are casting transfusion on a target with that corrupted blood. Now we just are getting the last trash we need for this dungeon, which is this Augur and this Juggernaut. And that's going to be the full count that we need, the full mob count. It's possible to pull these during the boss fight, but it is a little sketchy. We have done that from time to time, but it has also sometimes gone wrong for us. It is when it works, it looks really, really cool and looks really good. But at this level, we figured, okay, we've got 9 minutes. We have enough time to take this a little slower. This is another one of those spots where we would call an audible. If we felt like we were behind on time, we'd be like, okay, in order to beat this timer, we have to go fast. We have to do risky pulls. And that's an important ability to have when I got to follow. Somebody followed my Twitch stream. That was lucky. That's an important ability to have when you're pushing high keys, is you need the ability to call an audible and say, all right, we're ahead on time, so we can pull safer, or okay, we're behind on time. The only way we're beating this timer is by pulling risky. And that's not something that's a huge deal if you're not pushing super high keys, but really in any spot where you're about to deplete, you need to come up with something that you can do to potentially save you time. Because worst case, you fail whatever hard strategy you're going to try and execute, you're depleted anyway, it doesn't matter, right? But best case, you're going to actually turn a deplete into a keystone upgraded, and that is a great situation to have. So in this fight, we CC the adds that spawn here. If you don't CC them, you have to kill them. They run towards blood pools and soak the blood, and if that happens, of course, transfusion is going to heal the boss instead of killing her. That is a huge disaster. It adds a lot of time to the clock. But luckily, we have paralysis, then we have roots, and then we have blind, so we can CC the first 3. And then once the 4th spawns, usually the boss should be dead because she kills herself on the 3rd transfusion, and 1 add spawns per transfusion. Transfusion, you can actually stand in the blood pools a little bit before the cast starts. You don't have to wait for the cast to start in order to soak the pools. It's very important that no ticks ever start healing the boss. Like, you really want to make sure that when the transfusion starts casting here, so right now, everybody should already have a blood pool, because if they don't, the boss is going to not take as much damage as she would, right? If only 4 people have it and 1 person is healing her, she ends up losing health a lot slower, and you might have to do an extra phase, which should be really, really bad. But you'll see here, she's at 20% health. It really doesn't matter how much damage we do to the boss right now, because she is going to die to that next transfusion, and we're not going to be able to kill her to the next transfusion anyways. So any damage we do is maybe going to save 1 tick of transfusion. Probably not even that, though, so it's kind of irrelevant here. That's part of the strategy behind pulling trash with this boss, is that right now damage dealt to the boss is irrelevant, so we may as well be dealing our damage to relevant trash mobs, and just letting this boss, letting time elapse on this boss so that she casts transfusion and kills herself. So now 6.5 minutes on the clock, loads of time. Last boss fight, even on this high Tyrannical level, with our group's damage, does not take very long. You'll see our Demon Hunter is using Netherwalk to just run ahead there. That's because there's an RP sequence that starts when you get close to the last boss's stairs, and we want somebody to go start that RP immediately so that the rest of us don't have to wait. So that's why our Demon Hunter runs ahead, starts that RP. The rest of our group then doesn't have to worry about running through the fire or anything. I could be the person who does that too with Cloak, but Cloak has a lot of utility on this fight, so I end up not wanting to do that. I'd rather just have it available here. Now we're just running up these stairs, got to dodge the spiders. There are some big spiders and some small spiders, and the small spiders can be notoriously difficult to see, so you need to make sure that you don't end up clipping any of those or you'll die. And then we get up to the top of the fight, or the top of the stairs, we start the fight, 6 minutes on the clock. So really the only way we could wipe here is if we did something really, really stupid. You'll notice we only have 1 death on our death log right now, so we have tons of B-reses available. There's basically nothing that could wipe us here except for one of these adds making it to the boss. That being said, we still want to do as much damage to the boss as possible. On this first set of adds, everybody else has AoE cooldowns, and I'm still in my vendetta on the boss, so I just immediately, as soon as the ads spawn, shadow step back to the boss and keep working on the boss. One thing that's obnoxious about damage meters on this fight is that they actually don't track the damage you deal to the adds. Because those adds have the same names as the rest of your group, it gets tracked as friendly fire, which doesn't show up on DPS meters. So all the damage you see in the bottom right now is our DPS just to the boss and does not include all the damage dealt to the adds. That's why I'm so far ahead of all the other people, because I was focused on the boss and they were focused on the adds. And now we're doing future soul rends. I don't have Vendetta available, so I'm going to actually help out and deal some damage to these adds. And I don't need to get back on the boss or risk losing all of my Vendetta's cooldown utility. The way these adds work is that if they make it to the boss, your group is basically going to wipe on High Tyrannical. It does a huge dot on everybody. It can't even be immune with Cloak of Shadows. Cloak of Shadows will make you immune to the damage, but it won't even remove the dot, so once your Cloak's over, you're still going to die. And the way the adds work is that when you deal damage to one of those adds, it reflects a little bit of that damage onto the person with the same name. So each add that you spawn ends up causing you damage as it dies. Luckily, the damage, it seems to not scale all that much with Mythic Plus because it doesn't actually do all that much damage to us. So maybe the base number is really low or something, but it's basically not something to worry about. You'll see here, people's health is going down, but it's still mostly the tank's health that's going down. Everybody else just taking small amounts of damage as these adds die, not too lethal a threat at all. In terms of Tyrannical boss fights, this one is not very heavy on the AoE damage. It's mostly just a tank damage fight with that Sever ability. Tank really needs to make sure that they're dodging that as much as possible and using their defensives intelligently if they are low as a Sever is coming out. There's also an interrupt on the boss that's important to get, Racking Pain. It's a little bit obnoxious when your tank doesn't have a ranged interrupt like a Brewmaster, because sometimes you'll leave the boss in like a pool of spiders, and then it'll start casting. So we have our Balanced Druid just always ready to beam any cast that happens while the tank, if we're out killing adds and the tank has to kite away from spiders or something, and the boss then starts a Racking Pain cast, that's when we call for our Balanced Druid to use the Solar Beam. And having access to that actually makes it a lot safer on this fight. So now I've come back in from a Soul Rend, I'm popping my cooldowns, killing the boss. That's the strat here. You really want to make sure that you pop cooldowns like Vendetta when you are not going to have to run away for Soul Rend. And so you'll see I'm getting a full Vendetta in here without being forced to run away for adds. It's possible you can even save your first Vendetta of the fight for when you come back from the first Soul Rend of the fight. That is absolutely a valid strategy as well. That particularly means that you don't have to do the thing I did where I didn't help at all on the first set of adds. So if you're needed to help on the first set of adds, that's a good adjustment to make as well. This fight does take quite a long time. The boss has a lot of health here. You can see 14 million health, not a trivial amount of damage that we have to do. And she doesn't do any damage to herself, unlike many of her friends in the bosses here. You'll see our tank didn't like the positioning of these spiders. The way he does it is he normally just goes from corner to corner, but he couldn't easily run along the line from that top left corner to the current bottom left corner that we're in right now. So he just ran around to the side. As a Brewmaster, he has a bunch of rolls and stuff, so he's able to do that. And that was why he was able to execute that strategy there. And then we take our Soul Rends to the middle of the room, and we want to make sure that they're far enough away from the boss. If there's ever a problem where the Soul Rends are going to be a problem, no big deal. You'll see here I use my Cloak of Shadows and soaked a bunch of spiders. Not a great play. I kind of got caught there. I could have Shadow Stepped out of it, but I decided I was just going to cloak and not worry about it. Usually, I actually don't like using Cloak of Shadows to soak spiders unless I absolutely have to, because it puts those awful pools on the ground and pollutes the ground and makes it impossible for people to kite over those. So you'll see our tank is actually reversed the direction that he's pulling Yasma now, and he's pulling her away from because if he kept going in that counterclockwise direction, we would have ran into those pools and it would have been obnoxious, and you could have easily gotten zoned out of being able to avoid spiders. But instead, he's just quickly updated, quickly turned around, done a quick U-turn. He's going clockwise now, and we're going to be able to kill this boss before we get to the pool of spiders going in this direction. Those pools do despawn eventually, but it was not a great play for me. I wish I hadn't put all that ground pollution down. So that's how we beat Atal'Dazar plus 21. I hope you've enjoyed this video. If you have, you might enjoy some of the other content on my channel. I have guides to other dungeons, guide to affixes, guides to the Assassination Rogue spec, working on more such guides for the future. Please like and subscribe. I'd appreciate it if you did that, and thank you. I'll see you in the next one.